Here's Gilgeous-Alexander. McCollum staying with him. Spins, gets inside. Left-handed off the glass. Oh, what a sweet move.
Giddey, tough spot. Backdoor. What a pass. What a play. And J-Dub picks the pocket of Trae Young. He'll take it himself.
This is Dart. You're listening to the Uncontested.
What is up, and welcome to the Uncontested podcast, coming to you with the conclusion of the 2023-2024 Thunder season. It's Sunday, May 19th. I'm your host for the evening, Jacob Niffen, and I've got my guys with me. Nobody I'd rather be with on a Sunday night after the year that we just had, besides JD Silva.
Fellas.
JD, do you have something to say now, or do you want to say it later?
I'll say it later. That's fine.
We got Taylor Peterson.
The suspense is building, Silva. Can't wait.
It is.
We've got Nick Crane.
Every great story has an end. That's my wise word for the night.
I want to follow up on that. I just don't know how I want to do it, so I'm going to let it slide. We are brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network and the best fast casual dining in Oklahoma City. That would be Dave's Hot Chicken and Spark OKC. You can't go there before or after a Thunder game because there's no more Thunder games, folks.
Boo.
But you could go there any dadgum day of the week, and you should. You work downtown? Go grab some Dave's for lunch. You don't work downtown? Make a dinner date Friday night. Go get some Spark. Hang out at the park. Those two words rhyme. I'm a poet. Didn't even know it.
Oh my!
I'm gonna get
Speaking
inserted in the
end.
I'm gonna get inserted in the Kendrick Drake beef if I keep dropping these bars.
Lord, I know that it can get
my
cold, okay,
God.
but I'm the
That was well played, Silva.
Wow,
Well played.
that one.
I would like to invite JD to go to hell. Gentlemen, what a ride. The Thunder, the season is officially over. They ended the season last night down in Dallas in Game 6 with a 1-point loss, 117-116, in the most heartbreaking way possible. They had done everything right. They had got the dunk with 12 seconds left, up one. They'd forced the ball out of Luka's hands. 2 seconds left on the clock. Absolutely cannot blame Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You try to make a play in the biggest moment of your basketball life. You try to make a play. I would argue he made a play. He got his hand on the basketball, just didn't dislodge it, gets called for the foul. Just very unfortunate. You know, he even said in hindsight, he would have just like pulled his hands back and just let PJ shoot it. PJ shooting a double clutch 3 with 2.5 seconds left to win the series. Like if he makes that, he makes it. You know,
The way it was going.
it is the way it was going. He might actually make it. It had a 50% chance of going in. One of two things would have happened. It would have went in, or it would have not went in.
Math.
But the season comes to an end. I guess let's start off by just talking 5 minutes about that game. Like, I don't want to dwell too long on that game. But what are some big things? You know, we can't really say like takeaways for the next one, but what are some big things you saw in that last game that made you feel a certain way, JD?
I was hoping to see bounce back games for Chet and J-Dub. And I feel like offensively, I should say, they've both been good defensively the entire series. I was hoping to see J-Dub break out of this slump he's been in and just kind of figure out the matchup, figure out the way the defense was covering him more. And I feel like he did that. I feel like
22, 9, and 8.
Right. He was awesome. I thought Chet was awesome too. SJ continued to be awesome, but the biggest thing for me was I wanted to see J-Dub like look like J-Dub, and he did. He was awesome. So shout out to that guy.
Thought J-Dub had a great game. That's one point that I had, Silva, is that I felt like he got back to his spots. But one thing I really loved is it looked like Mark was very intentional in trying to get him involved in the offense, whether it be backdoor cuts or some, off-ball screens. We saw that very first play. Obviously, it probably looks different if the Thunder don't win the tip, but they win the tip, and I think it was Shai who threw that lob to Dub, who immediately broke to the basket. And I think even if they hadn't won the tip, I think that first offensive possession, like we used to see during the Thunder 1.0 era, where Steven Adams always gets that first look on offense, I think there would have been a similar play call for Dub to try and get him involved. So I thought Dub finally kind of looked like himself. He was, I don't have the box score pulled up. I think it was 3 of 5 from 3 off the top of my head. I was looking at it here a little bit ago. Much more efficient from the floor. And I thought he did a great job attacking and then creating for teammates. Our friend Rich at Mavs Draft on Twitter brought up 2 things at the end of the game that I thought was pretty huge. The Mavs went 11 of 21 from 3 in the second half to the Thunder's 5 of 17. And the Mavs won the second half rebounding battle 26-14. So shout out Peyton in the chat. Goodness.
I think we pause the podcast.
Yep.
JD?
Yeah, we got a big old donation, $100 from our friend Peyton. He says, just wanted to say thank you guys for the consistent content year after year. No other group of degenerates I'd rather follow along with. Already looking forward to next year.
Awesome stuff.
Peyton just donated like half of my paycheck. So shout out Peyton. Also shout out the public education system. I don't even know what to say.
I got a few words. Peyton, you're so cheap. You could just give us 100 flat instead of $99.99. Just kidding. I know Peyton personally. He's one of the best dudes out there. Fun fact about Peyton, has one of the best Thunder sports cards collections of anybody that I know. There may be better ones out there. I don't know of them. Big time Thunder fan, awesome dude, legit degenerate that's been following and listening to us since like we were using regular headphones with a little microphone on them.
Since we're doing pizza giveaways
on Zoom. Yeah. He's been
uploading
here
SoundCloud
all along. Yeah. So
he's a longtime friend of Nick and I's from really middle school.
Yeah.
Matt Noonan in the chat says he did $99.99 to avoid the donation tax write-offs.
Well done
for the government.
Smart. No, that's awesome, and appreciate you, Peggers. Yeah, it's been a ride. I guess not to like put us down a sentimental rabbit hole, but we started this pod when this was a
hole I'd rather be in.
When this was a contending team with Paul George. We rode through some dark days. Silva's first pod was the 70 whatever point loss to the Grizzlies. This team's back. Probably not the way that some people in the chat wanted this to end, but this team's gonna be good for a long time. If you're not listening to Uncontested regularly, like now's the time to start because things are gonna get fun.
100%. Shout out Peyton. Nick, you called them peggers. Do we want to dive into that, the background of that on the podcast?
Maybe we'll put that one offline.
We'll put that one behind a paywall, but shout out to Peyton. That's really cool. And I cannot agree more.
Just to follow up with Nick's sentiments to Peyton and to everyone, like, I think I can speak for the entire show that we've just been kind of overwhelmed this season and especially this postseason with the love and attention and viewership of everybody. I mean, we love talking basketball, so we do this if there's 5 people, but there have been like tens of thousands of people, which is at times like almost overwhelming. So I think before we dive any deeper in the show, just a massive, massive, massive thank you to all the listeners, anyone who's ever tuned into a live stream, watched a YouTube video, download the podcast, follow us on socials, got in here and talked shit to us, dropped a super chat, like anything. It's overwhelming. It's incredible. I think I can also speak for all of us when I say like we're living the dream doing this. Like we are absolutely living the dream, and the relationships we've built through this with our co-hosts and with the folks that listen. It's huge. It's awesome. It's why we do it. No one else would rather talk basketball with and to, and hear from you guys. And we love you. So thank you.
Well said.
Not agree more.
All right, Taylor, you want to talk some more about some numbers?
We'll see you next week.
Numbers, stats.
Tuning in to the Uncontested podcast later.
I just thought the Thunder resorted back to a lot of the issues that we saw earlier in the season Also, Shai went 3 of 18 on jumpers in the second half after having just an incredible first half. He still was dominant. But that obviously is an issue when his teammates aren't stepping up. And then one thing that I mentioned yesterday, prior to the game, yesterday afternoon, when I was on the radio, one thing that stood out to me is we talked so much about the role players of the Thunder really struggling this series in comparison to the Mavs. That's obviously a story of the series. But it feels like whenever they got the ball, whether it was Lou Dort, Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe sometimes, they just immediately felt flustered and would either throw up a last minute 3-point shot or would try and like recklessly drive to the rim. We saw Dort resort to some of his bad habits this series rather than just swing the ball back to J-Dub or Shai when the Mavs defense is still out of rhythm and they have the opportunity to attack again. Just because you get the ball doesn't mean you have to immediately do something with it. You can pass it back to those guys and create those opportunities when the Mavs defense doesn't have the opportunity to get set and continue to protect the rim. That was one thing that really stood out to me this series, but you have to credit the Mavs defense because, I mean, a lot of the time, the reason we saw those reckless shots come, it was because they were coming so late in the shot clock. But those were the two things that really stood out to me the most, especially in the second half.
Yeah, I think my big takeaway from this one is really the takeaway of the entire series and playoffs is, while there's a lot of things that we could point to and probably will point to on this pod of how the series could have swung differently, this is going to come off weird. The only thing Shai still had to prove he was a superstar outside of an MVP or a championship, obviously, was that what he does translates to the playoffs. Like that was like the only last diss on him or flaw of his was that like, yeah, but can you do it in the playoffs? He did it all throughout the playoffs. He did it in that game 6. It's like, not to oversimplify where the Thunder's at in their rebuild. Shai is a number 1 on a championship contender. You just got to get the pieces around him that can support him. And when he's having a hell of a night or an off night, there's guys that can insulate him like we saw with Dallas. Whether that's someone shooting 10, 20% over their season average or somebody just playing well for a night out of the blue, like he's having that insulation away from this team being what I think a lot of Thunder fans hope they could be. If you think about it, even if they would have advanced past the Mavericks, they're only halfway to a championship. You got to win 4 series. They won 1. It's like everybody that's saying that one piece at the deadline, or what if they had won this series? They're still only halfway there. Like let's be real here. But Shai is a number 1 guy, and that's my big takeaway.
Yeah, you know who was also halfway there? Bon Jovi.
Oh my God.
I did not know where you were going with that.
Thunder did seem to be living on a prayer for a lot of this series.
Wow.
So I think this is like kind of the natural transition into like the other big question I had for you guys is, what did we learn through the playoffs for this Thunder team? Like, what are the things, what are the big takeaways, not from that game, but specifically from this playoff run as its entirety, really? I've kept referring back to this idea that Presti said they needed to get this team to the playoffs. You don't go make big splashes before that. You get this team to the playoffs. You see what you have. You stress test it. You put them through the trials and tribulations. And that is where you get your data. And that is where you figure out what you have and what you need. So what did we figure out? What they have and what they need? What worked? What didn't work? Like, now that it's all said and done, whenever we come back to this, like, what did we learn from this playoff run? And I think Nick's already given us thing number 1, which is the Thunder have an undisputed, like, 1A, can be the finals MVP, can lead your team, throw them on your back and lead them to an NBA finals, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And that is the hardest piece to get. Make no doubt about it. That is the hardest step in this entire process, is to get him, to get that guy. And they have him. And they have him under contract for 4 more years after this?
4 more years, yep.
With no opt-out clause, and a guy who seems very motivated to be here and is very like in the mindset of I am where my feet are. They've got that guy. To me, that's like one of the big things, one of the big data points we took from this playoff run is they've got that dude. JD, why don't you bring up the next one, whatever you have. Like, what is something that we've learned about this team from this playoff run that we can apply to our, I don't know, our collective knowledge of this team moving forward?
I think there's so many ways I feel like I could go with this. It's like, how much do we want to look forward, like look to the offseason? I think we just want to reflect on this series for this point. And I think it is that Chet and J-Dub and Dort, like Chet and J-Dub specifically, although they are young and this was their first playoff series, they were awesome, especially on defense. Like they proved so much. You could see them problem solving game to game, trying to figure it out. Like you just saw them. You didn't see, there's always a fear for me when you have young players that are awesome all regular season that they're just going to kind of fade away in the playoffs. And I didn't get that. The effort was always there. Even if the production wasn't always there for like a J-Dub or a Chet offensively, I always saw the effort. I always saw you could see the cogs moving in their heads, play to play, figuring things out. I don't know. Like Mark has always talked about this group of guys being sponges, and you could see them being that like in the playoffs, game to game. And I loved seeing that process. Like I don't know, when that game ended yesterday, I didn't feel that bummed out. I felt like excited because it's like, okay, these guys have been through it now. I have no doubt in my mind they're going to get better in the offseason, and I'm very, very excited to see what better looks like for a team that was already this good.
I think that's a very fair way to look at it.
I like
Taylor,
that a
Nick,
lot.
what's something that you learned about this team, something that we can take away from this playoff run?
I think that Sam Presti did the right thing at the deadline. And that's probably not the popular
Don't
opinion.
tell Twitter that.
On Twitter. Again, like I said on my last little rant, this team did not even get halfway to a championship. Even if they beat Dallas, they'd be at halfway. They're going to face Denver, Minnesota, where you're going to be an underdog, and then probably the Celtics. Even if they had traded for the perfect big man who gets you the extra couple rebounds and you get past Dallas, like the reality is, like anything can happen. His team's got the talent. They could have had a miraculous run, but it would have been that. It would have been miraculous. Like if the Thunder won a championship this year, it would have been nuts. So I think that I commend Presti for what he did. Like, see what you have before you make the big move. They like the popular thing for Mavs fans and others right now is saying that Oklahoma City helped Dallas get Lively and helped them get Gafford. If Oklahoma City wanted those guys, they could have had them.
Also, not to cut you off here, but
you are.
Yes.
Go ahead.
That I get it. It's like a niche, interesting coincidence. But the people that are like making a big deal out of it, you had no clue you were going to play the Mavericks in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever they did that trade, the Mavericks were fighting for a play-in spot.
Mm-hmm.
Like the narrative that, oh, the Thunder brought around their own down. Just shut the hell up. You know, it's like, it's such a lazy ass talking point.
It is. I'll just say, like, the Thunder has every asset on earth. If they wanted to go get Siakam or OG or whoever, they could have done so. They didn't. I'm glad they didn't, because diagnosing your team's issues based on what you've seen in one regular season is so short-sighted and stupid. I'd almost even argue, like, I think that Oklahoma City should make some move this offseason, maybe not the move. Even 10 games of the playoffs kind of switches like what you think this team might actually need. And like, is Giddey part of your plans? And does that change who the kind of guy is that you trade for? And are you wanting a jumbo wing now if you get rid of Giddey? Like, there's so many more points of clarity on what you might want to make that move for than you would have had in February, when it still, like, frankly felt like this Thunder team is right up there in the West, but like, can they really maintain this? Are they really that good? Hindsight's 2020. Like, game 82 when they were the first seed, it's like, oh wow, maybe they should have made a bigger deal at the deadline. Even in February, we didn't know if this was like a fluke or like will they choke down the stretch. All I have to say, my takeaway, Jacob, is that Presti did the right thing by not making an impulse move.
think that is very spot on, because if he does make that kind of trade, do we see Shai? I know, a little slip there. Do we see Shai come out and be this kind of player if he doesn't have as much usage as he had when all the attention was on him? He was first on the team in points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game, blocks per game, and steals per game. That's absolutely absurd. And it's fun and kind of funny to think back 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we're talking about like, well, you know, the debate amongst Thunder fans was, can Shai be a 1A or a 1B? Is he Batman or is he Robin? Pretty wild to think back on now. We saw him on that stage. Silva, you mentioned seeing guys like Chet and Dub adjust to the series. Yes, maybe it took Dub longer than we hoped for him to adjust, but we saw that happen in game 4. And so if the Thunder go and make one of those moves, we don't see that kind of stuff happen. Also, if they... I'm just kind of going on a rant here, but I'm seeing so much about the Thunder need to trade for fill-in-the-blank superstar or whoever player it may be next season. I still want those reps for J-Dub and Chet and even Shai and others. So that's something to monitor. That kind of leads to maybe one of my biggest takeaways from the series is the inexperience versus youth. And I know we're going to get into this when we talk about player exit interviews, but one thing that Wiggins mentioned that I found really interesting is he said he didn't think the team's success this season nor their failures in the postseason really came down to the youth. He found it to be more so due to the experience. This Thunder team, regardless of their age, just haven't been in this playoff environment before, and they're going to learn from it. He used the example of like the back-to-back turnovers. You have a couple turnovers in a row and just letting that fluster you. But for me, it comes back like to the missed shots that we saw so much this series from the guys like Lou Dort. So all the players we've talked about. When they're missing those shots, it just seemed like they were very flustered and weren't able to get back to their style of play. And I think that's something they'll take away from this series and be able to learn from. So the inexperience versus youth argument, that is one thing that really kind of stood out to me from the series.
To me, that's the same argument, though. Inexperience versus youth.
And to Taylor's point about Thunder should trade for a blank superstar. Let's put this out there in the internet, because it'll come up again. We'll talk about it again. If blank star is a max player that is under contract for more than 2 more seasons, blank player is not being traded for, because that means one of Dub or Chet is not on the roster. So keep that in mind. You can't have 4 max players on a roster. So if you want to trade for blank player and he's a max player, follow up your tweet to us with which of Dub or Chet you want to get rid of.
So many fans just think, again, more rants here, but so many fans just think that you can just throw all the draft picks in the world that the Thunder have in their arsenal and be able to trade for fill-in-the-blank player. And that's not how it works.
Yeah.
I have a few thoughts on things that we can take away from this playoff series, things that we learned. One is that shooting is the name of the game. And I think as they move into the summer, that is something that will be focused on. I have a question for you guys, and this is something we're going to dive into as the summer progresses. We're not going to really get too deep into the weeds now, but I specifically want to ask Nick this question. I've talked a lot the past 2 games about how when push has come to shove and it is like you have to win, they benched Josh and they went with a shooter, right? When it really got to like shove becomes throwing fists in the 4th quarter last night, and it was down to you win these last 3 minutes or you're going home. They went with the 2 big lineup. Nick, is there something bigger for me to read into there? Do you think that was just an in the moment, this is what will work best for this specific moment? Or is there a bigger thing to look into there with them going big at the end of the game with J. Will and Chet, and maybe that being a sign for what should be permanent, like in the not permanent, but a bigger fixture moving forward? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's more situation and need and matchup than it is what's to come. Like you said, we're going to talk a lot about this. Like, do they need a real 5 next to Chet? Do they need a beefy 4? Do they just need a backup center? We'll talk about that later. I think that specifically was in the moment. getting crushed on the boards and second chance points are literally the reason that the Mavs got back in the game. They just needed big bodies for rebounding. Didn't work. Mavs kept getting rebounds and second chance points. I think that was more situation than anything. I do think that we should never think about the Thunder and lineups in a 5-man vacuum. There's always going to be different rotations and lineups and 5-man groups or 3-man groups that you can run out with other players. And there will probably be situations where like there is Chet and a real big. There's probably a lot of situations there's Chet and a beefy 4. So I don't think it's like a foreshadowing into like Oklahoma City wants to play that way long term. Could they? Sure. Will they? Probably in certain moments, but I don't take too much from that.
Every time you say beefy 4, it sounds like you're ordering something from Taco Bell.
I would love a beefy 5-layer burrito is my go-to at Taco Bell. So beefy 5.
I love it. Love it. This is a conversation that could literally last like 4 hours on a podcast. You guys want to put a cap in this for now, and we can return on a later episode on, I mean, we already have plans to do that anyways, but things that you can take away from this playoff series and how it will affect the team moving forward?
I just was going to mention Kyrie Irving's quote. Obviously, he's undefeated in elimination games. He's absolutely insane. Had some big plays, specifically throughout the majority of the series and last night. But overall, it wasn't like he was the one who put the nail in the coffin or anything. But he called this, and again, probably prisoner of the moment, all the emotions going. But he called this the toughest playoff series of his career. And whether that's actually true or not, considering that Kyrie's been in, obviously, championship series, finals series, still says a lot about this Thunder team, the respect that they have around the league, and how it's not just Thunder fans, but everyone around the league is expecting this team to come back. And obviously there's so many comments and discourse about, well, we saw what happened last time, 2012, and seeing James Harden traded and KD leads, but like, this is such a different situation. Those are just lazy takes. So anyways, I thought Kyrie giving the Thunder props is just something to kind of end on and something to be excited about moving forward.
I think it's time we take a break. We will be back in just a moment. And we are back. JD, I think it is time to tell some people about some chicken. The East Hollywood pop-up sensation turned fast casual superstar Dave's Hot Chicken is serving Oklahoma in Bricktown, Edmond, and soon in Chisholm Creek. I think it's very soon in Chisholm Creek if it's not open already. Their mouth-watering sliders and tenders are offered at 7 spice levels, ranging from no spice at all to Reaper. Each piece is hand-breaded chicken and is spiced to order using a blend crafted specifically for its heat level. Or you can get no spice on it at all for no heat. They've got sides of house-made kale slaw, creamy mac and cheese, and crispy seasoned fries. And the new Dave's Not Chicken, which are cauliflower slices that taste just like Dave's Hot Chicken, but they're not chicken. That's an awesome option for all of our veggie friends out there. I do know we have multiple vegetarians that listen to the show, so you guys should definitely hit that up. Visit Dave's Hot Chicken in Bricktown right next to Fuzzy's Taco Shop before or after the next Thunder game, except there are no Thunder games on the come-up. So just go to Dave's anyways. It is time for some hot takes of the week. Who wants to kick us off?
Not me. I'm still thinking.
A lot going on in the chat right now.
So maybe
going on
Jacob queued up for us. So we want hot takes of the week in what?
Whatever hot take you want, Nick.
That's why I'm stuck on. I'm like, ooh.
It can be an off-season take. It can be a rest of this playoffs take. It can be something from. I fired off a hot take on Twitter last night that said Luka could sneak a knife in his sock at halftime, gut Tony Brothers like a fish, and wouldn't get the second technical foul. They were just never going to call it.
The problem
that one's mild, no spice.
The problem with this is that I'm one of those people that like, if you give me a broad idea, I don't know where to start and I never get anything done. But if you just say, hey, go do this thing, I get it done. Like I'm a doer. Okay. I'll give you a hot. Go, you go. If
Y'all
you've
want-
got two, please go.
Well, I have two, and I'll let you guys decide between the two. One's more realistic, which means it's probably a little less hot, but maybe it still has some spice, I hope. The other one's less realistic, and we can get crazy.
Go with the less realistic one. Why not?
Less realistic one. Kenny will stay around. Kenrich Williams will stay around for another season due to his locker room presence, but he's not long for this team, hence his playoff minutes. Basically, I think Kenrich Williams is traded around this time next year, next offseason.
Oh, I will take extra hot on that. The contract's too good.
It is weird though, man.
Or it's a great asset since the contract is so good.
If you had told me Kenrich wasn't going to be part of the rotation in the playoffs, I would have said you're crazy. Like that would have been like a Reaper take in March.
Yeah.
So what level do you give it, Nick?
That he's not on the team
In 1 year.
I don't think it's that. I mean, I think it's medium or hot. Maybe that's a plug for something that's been top of mind for me. On every Thunder roster ever, people get attached to like the 15 players. Like these are the guys, and you're just going to swap out one or two. It's no different now when the team's fun, you love them, and it's your favorite team ever. When the team wins a championship in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, less than half the current roster is going to be in a Thunder uniform. You love Isaiah Joe, you love Wiggins, you love Jay Will, you love Kenny, you love Ja. Half these guys are not going to be here. So for that reason, I don't think it's super hot that Kenrich wouldn't be here in a year. Because my hot take, I don't think Isaiah Joe is here in a year. I think that his contract needs are going to be very high and probably deservedly so because shooters get paid. And I think that he's a guy that Sam says, all right, we're going to put you in a situation. We're going to send you to a team that needs you and is another playoff team, and you're going to go shoot lights out for them. They're going to give you that $20 million a year. We're going to get an asset, and we're going to try to replace you with a shooter. So there's mine.
Actually, I put that in I had that same conversation in a group text earlier today, just that I think so many fans just kind of think that the Trey Mans and the Darius Baisleys and players of that nature are the casualties of a rebuild. And I think they really need to prepare themselves, and we don't need to dive down this rabbit hole yet, but for the Josh Giddeys or the Isaiah Joes or the Kenrich Williams. But Nick, just to clarify before we give our rating for your hot take, are you saying Joe is not on this team this upcoming season, or like mine a year from now?
Mine would be this upcoming season, because you have to make a decision now if you're going to club option and unrestricted the following summer, or if you're going to extend. So extension talks are happening now. Like now is the official time. It would, I'm sure they've been talking, but like Isaiah Joe's extension will be negotiated this summer. It's either going to be really, really high and Sam's going to say, we're going to trade you now, or it's going to be a number he likes and he's going to lock it in. I do not think he'll exercise the club option and let him be unrestricted the following summer.
Correct. And I don't think they'll let him get the restricted free agency either. I think it's extension or gone.
That's what my point.
Okay.
That's why I'm saying my hot take of him not being on the team is like an immediate thing. It's either like he is extended this summer or he's traded.
Okay. Makes sense. I am going mild. Just because to me, Nick, I think this hot take is essentially a take it or leave it. It's one thing or the other. And so I think you could argue this is either a no spice or a reaper. You're at one end of the spectrum and you're at the other. I just think they keep him around. I think they get
Wait,
an
so you'd be on the other end of
then.
that, Jacob.
It'd be
more of a
like
hot.
Reaper.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, then I will go like extra hot.
Okay.
Sorry,
so
I got it backwards.
We'll
I think
have
he stays around.
We'll have a lot of discussion on this in a future pod, but tease it out for the listeners. What's the highest number you're comfortable with?
I'm so
per
bad
year?
with these without looking things up.
Highest number I'm comfortable with, or what I think it will be.
Highest number you're comfortable with?
The same contract Lou Dort's on.
Okay. I think he gets more. So
I do too. I was going to go with like hot, simply instead of extra hot, simply because I do think Isaiah Joe likely sticks around. And I think he's going to be a little more willing to negotiate with the Thunder, maybe even take just a little less from other teams simply to stay with this team. And because of the role he'll have moving forward with this team, he already knows what it is. And I think it will either be the same or potentially increase moving forward. but it's not completely unlikely because if the Thunder have a huge target in mind or they make a big trade, I mean, that's likely going to take priority over an Isaiah Joe extension. So that's why I give it a hot.
I'd go hot also. I hadn't thought about it until Nick brought it up, actually, that, yeah, I mean, there is a chance he's not coming back. There's a lot that could change in the offseason, and that is one I hadn't really thought of. I just kind of assumed he'd stay, but yeah, that's why I'm not going like Reaper. I think I'm more in the hot range. I have one thought up myself now.
Let's hear it. Jay Da Silva.
The Thunder will trade for Kevin Durant this offseason.
Shit.
Going for the low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
I think naming any single specific player traded for is like very, very hot just because the odds of you hitting that. I'm going extra hot. I'm not going Reaper.
I had extra hot as well.
That's the thing.
I'm gonna go
that specific player.
I'm gonna go hot. And it's not because I think there's a chance that it happens. I think in football, if we have football listeners,
I love football.
your best chance of winning a title with a talented team is when your quarterback is on a rookie scale deal and you can just put high paid weapons around them.
Shout out the Texans.
Shout out the Texans. It was the Chiefs before the Texans, before Mahomes got paid. Oklahoma City's in a similar spot where they know Chet and J-Dub are going to get big deals, but those won't kick in for 2 years. And so my comment earlier of if you're going to trade for a star that's on a max contract, sorry, you can't. But the caveat was if that money is on the books for longer than 2 years. Kevin is one of those, maybe it oddly lines up. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's meant to be. I don't know. Maybe that's why it's hot instead of extra hot or Reaper. You could, in theory, trade for Kevin Durant, who's on a max contract, and still extend Chet and Dub, and Katie falls off the books right at the right time, and maximize that rookie quarterback window where you have 4 guys that are either currently stars or rising stars and kind of cheat the system. So whether it's that situation or like you sign Pascal Siakam to a 2-year insane deal in the offseason where it drops off the same time, like that type of deal could in theory work if Presti believes in the maximize the youth experience. Kevin is one of those that fits in theory, so I'm gonna go hot. I don't think they're gonna trade for Kevin, but it's not one of those off the table. If Kevin had 3 or 4 years on his deal, it's a hell no chance. Like it physically can't happen, but it could happen.
I think you got it, Nick.
To Smoot in the chat, they asked, do we keep Chet and J-Dub in that scenario? Hell yes.
You
You're
have
trading
to.
like Giddey.
If you don't make the trade, if they're not on the roster.
This is if you're trading for a star,
And it's not like the Suns are in the position to control those
correct.
negotiations.
no. If you're trading for this star that's on a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal to maximize that window, it is one of those like if it doesn't work, it's like shit, you still got the same core 3, and then shit, you got another 40 mil, 50 mil coming off the books. Let's do something else.
Gordon Hayward on steroids. I love it.
Right. It's like a good Gordon Hayward trade.
We'll get to that in a minute. You ready? You ready for the hot take?
Oh gosh, Jacob hasn't even gone yet.
I haven't
Sorry,
even gone
Jacob.
yet. You sons of guns. The Minnesota Timberwolves, your 2024 NBA champs.
I'll give you medium based off what I just witnessed. It's insane, and I don't quite trust the Celtics.
I'll give
I'm
you
gonna-
medium.
Yeah. I'm also
They
going
are
medium.
good.
They're
Good,
real
good, good, good. You think about championship teams, it is depth, check. Size, check. Shooting, check. Star talent, check. Defense, check. Length, check. If the Thunder would beat the Mavs, and we were sitting here talking about who do you want, Denver or Minnesota, I think the only reason I would say Denver's who you want is because they're the reigning champs and they've done it. Every other sign points to Minnesota being a better, scarier team for any Western Conference foe, in this case being the Mavericks. Like, they're good.
Let me ask you guys just kind of it's specific, but I want to make it generic as like not just Thunder fans, but just in general. And also Thunder Chick just dropped in the chat. We have a lot of people in the live stream tonight. If you are in the live stream and in the Oklahoma City area and you do not have the weather up next to the live stream, you should do so. There is some pretty bad weather headed this way. So just make sure you guys are safe. We want to make sure everybody's good. Like in the Thunder's position now, would you rather the team that knocked you out of the playoffs win the next round and go to the finals so you could say, hey, we lost to the team that made it to the finals? Or would you rather just watch them get their brains beat in for therapeutic reasons? And not just the Thunder, but just in, like, if you're a Denver fan, do you want to see Minnesota win to be able to say, hey, we lost to the eventual champs or the eventual runner-up champs? Or do you want to see Dallas beat Minnesota if you're a Denver fan, just because you want the therapeutic sense of those sons of guns lost?
I think the key is fans. Teams aren't thinking about that at all. They aren't taking.
Well, no, that's what I'm asking you. Is what as a fan, which is better?
I mean, personally, it doesn't make me feel any better if the Mavericks beat the Wolves in the Western Conference Finals.
Touche. JD, do you have a thought on this?
I don't know, because it's like if the Mavs lose, it's more. I'm thinking of like, who will the Thunder have to play? Who's becoming a true badass in real time that the Thunder are gonna have to deal with later? It's like if the Wolves continue to ascend, it's like, well, shit, they'll be back next year and a thorn in our sides. I'm almost like I'm hoping everyone loses besides the Thunder ultimately, but yeah, podcasting in a tornado, that is like.
That one made me
Oklahoma in the
chuckle.
spring. Technically, I think all three of us are pretty okay with where we're at, so we're all good. But
Cool.
thank you for the worry, Matt Noonan. Appreciate
I
it.
did see lightning through my window here, right as you said. There's a tornado somewhere. It's like,
Very
oh,
ominous.
shit. Yeah.
Okay, all good on hot takes.
Yep.
Yes.
Let's move on. A lot of content to cover. Let's move on to exit interviews,
Before we
which
do that,
happened
Jacob,
today.
Before we do that, do you mind if I?
Yeah. Take JD. The floor is yours.
It's time to lay to rest this Thunder team from the 2023-2024 season. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Thank you all for listening. The Mavs, I called you rat bastards at the beginning of the series. You're still rat bastards now. I hope you lose in the next round. That's it.
Woo. What's
That
like a
was
dying dog sound?
the worst eulogy I've ever heard in my life.
It's like old Yeller.
Let's get into some exit interviews, which happened Sunday, May 19th. Nick Crane, I am going to put the onus on you. Every player and coach did an exit interview.
Mm-hmm.
We have lots of different quotes we want to mention. We can kind of bounce around. But we got to start with a player. Which player would you like to start the conversation around?
Do you want low-hanging fruit or do you want something
I
like...
want whatever Nick Crane wants.
For entertainment value, I'd love to talk about, and I actually have maybe a very different viewpoint.
Some
than you
nuanced
guys will.
thoughts probably on this topic. That's fair.
But on Gordon Hayward, Jacob, since you're hosting us here, why don't you tell everybody that maybe didn't see it what Gordon Hayward said today, and we'll volley some thoughts on it. I've got some different thoughts, but I want you to maybe kick us off on Gordon.
Nick, being the contrarian, refused to believe. Here's some quotes from Gordon Hayward's exit interview. Silva, do we have a sounder for Gordon Hayward? Not what I thought we were going with, but I'll take it. Gordon Hayward on his low volume of shot attempts. This is these are via Clemente Almanza. Quote, that's credit to kind of the role I was placed in and lack of touches. Gordon Hayward, again, after the first month or so when I was coming back from the calf strain, I felt completely fine. He said it was difficult to find a rhythm. Quote, it was disappointing with how it all worked out. Certainly frustrating. It kind of is what it is. I feel like as a player, I have a lot to offer and wasn't given much of an opportunity to do that. My minutes and my role were sporadic.
Where do you?
Do you just want me to riff for a minute?
Yeah.
Send it.
I've been gaslit before. Not to that level. I specifically listened. I didn't read Gordon's quotes. I went and listened to Gordon's quotes. For what it's worth, I think Gordon Hayward completely believes what he says. Right? That's a thing. I heard a lot of blaming, a lot of pointing the finger. I wasn't put in a position. I didn't get the opportunity. My minutes were sporadic. You know what they say whenever you point a finger at somebody? You got 4 fingers pointing right back at you, buddy.
Your thumb's pointing at me, though, Jacob. That's
You
3.
know what yeah, that's my gun.
Pew pew. That's the teacher in Jacob. Right there. That was a good one.
I felt like Gordon took no responsibility for anything that happened. Don't tell me you didn't get an opportunity. Like, they put you in games. It almost feels like he's jaded. Like, he got mad at his lack of opportunity and his minutes, and so he refused to shoot the basketball. Like, you got put out there in the playoffs. You got put out there a ton in the regular season. I get not wanting to step on toes, and at first that's what I thought it was. After this exit interview, you know what it reminded me a lot of? It reminded me of Melo's exit interview, where he just kind of came in and tried to shit on everybody and burn everything down on his way out. Nick, I know you have a differing perspective. Made me lose a lot of respect for the guy.
I agree.
Like,
and to that, sorry.
It just pissed me off. Like, bro, you came in and didn't do jack shit. Now you're going to bitch? Like, what do you have to complain about? You came in, you didn't do anything. You were given an opportunity, and you chickened out, and you collected your $30 million, and you went on your way.
Yeah. He got minutes. We saw him.
Not only that, there was all the confusion at the trade deadline about who's included in this trade, and oh my gosh, Micic is included all of a sudden. That was due to Hayward not being willing to waive his bonus, which I totally get. But like, after all of that, all that we just heard, it is pretty frustrating when you think about him not being willing to waive that. But I just don't think he was a guy who wanted to be traded to begin with. And to me, it just seems like somebody who has been a star his whole entire career. He's had a lot of injuries he's battled through, and he has not yet been able to come to grips with the new reality that's facing him, and that he's not the same player, and quite frankly, may not be in the league much longer. And I think he has a lot of frustrations internally. I think it was a hard season for him. That's probably a lot of things that Nick will allude to, just with the situation in general. It's hard to come into, and I totally get it, but it is frustrating. At the same time, that's not why the Thunder made the trade. It was all about the cap flexibility that they will have moving forward.
I think it was both.
Yeah, right.
I think they brought him into play. And
I think if he plays well, it's the cherry on top, or it's like, icing on the cake, whatever you want to call it.
Maybe. I mean, I will never know. You could lean one way or the other on that. Nick, before I let you riff, I'm going to take ownership. Because when that trade happened, I said they were bringing him in, and he would end up starting over Gordon Hayward. Or sorry, not Gordon Hayward would end up starting over Josh Giddey. I had it completely wrong. I completely missed the mark. To my defense, the Gordon Hayward that played in Charlotte a month and a half before the trade would have come to this team and started.
And fun fact, before you continue, in 23 games in Charlotte that him and PJ played together, Gordon Hayward outscored PJ in 12-23.
Yeah.
He had
like, I take ownership.
46 minutes.
I had it completely wrong. I thought they were getting the Gordon Hayward that we've always seen. I didn't think they were getting the Gordon Hayward that came in, was too scared, pouted, and then threw a fit that things didn't go his way and wanted to blame everybody else instead of taking ownership himself. He talked the entire press conference about this team and his position on this team in the past tense, and I could not be more glad that he did. He's probably already on a plane back to Charlotte. Zach Lowe said on his podcast the other day, doesn't even know if Gordon Hayward will be in the league next year, and I'm kind of inclined to believe him. Nick, now the floor is yours.
I'll start by saying Gordon was not good in OKC. in any capacity. What I wanted to bring up, to be contrarian, and I don't fully like lean this way, to be clear, just to give a different viewpoint. When he was traded to the Thunder at the deadline, it was deadline day, like one of the first big deals of the day. Him and Oklahoma City and Charlotte, like the whole system, had been talking for at least a couple days. Like when Gordon found out the morning of the deadline, it wasn't like, oh wow, I'm going to Oklahoma City. Like this was something in the works. So with that in mind, not that like Gordon is the kind of player that has like this power where he's like, all right, Oklahoma City, you want to trade for me? What's my role? But I'm led to believe, given the fact that it was a discussion multiple days before the trade, that role was probably discussed. Like, hey, we're going to trade for you. Here's what I think your role is going to be. I mean, shit, whenever he was traded for, it was after the deadline that he actually started playing. Like, he played a lot of minutes. They weren't good minutes, and people started saying, holy crap, what is this? But at least need to believe that there was some kind of role discussed. Nothing's ever, it's kind of like Micic all over again. Like, come to America and play for the Thunder. And he's like, but I want this role. And it's like, okay, we can tell you you're going to have this role, but if you suck, you're not going to keep the role. Like, it's just not how it works. It kind of feels similar, where Gordon was promised, maybe it was what Jacob said, when playoffs come around, you're probably going to start for us. Like, you kind of fit better in the starting five. You can shoot. You do a lot of the things that Josh can't, that might be exposed and were exposed in the playoffs. But ultimately, it didn't work out, and he wasn't great. And I don't know if that's like the calf injury lingering or what it is. But I think his comments about it wasn't what I thought it would be or could be, I think some of that is frustration about what he was maybe not promised, but like what was discussed when this happened. And I get it. Like, that's like, hey, here's a job offer. Come over and work for us. Here's what your job's going to look like. And then it's like completely different. You're like cleaning the toilets instead of getting on conference calls with the board of directors. It's like, of course you're going to be frustrated. Everything's relative expectations, right?
I would push back just a bit that I think it was a promise. I think in Gordon's head, he probably thinks it was more of a promise. I think Presti and Dignall in the front office would tell you that it was more of a discussion, that if you perform the way that
there's not a promise. There's not a promise. Just like me, it's not a promise. It's a discussion around what your role would be.
And he didn't live up to that. It's kind of the whole point of it.
No, I completely agree.
Again, 0 points and 46 playoff minutes.
I'm giving you contrarian. I'm not giving you. I'm not cheering for Gordon Hayward here.
No, I know.
Damn right you're not.
I think that was a discussion, though. I think his role was discussed in depth before the trade happened. So that's again, everything's relative expectations, and that's his expectation. I think too, he made comments about the team was already rolling, and it's hard to like come in and play and not disrupt the flow and the rhythm. I think part of that is in his own head. I don't want to come in and like mess this up. I think a lot of it too is like he was probably told, you're going to come in, here's the role we envisioned for you, but we don't want you to be a volume scorer. We want you to be like this veteran guy that is like complimentary. I don't think he ever came to Oklahoma City with any sort of green light or yellow light. It was like if you're open, shoot it, but don't try to self-create. And I think in his head, it was like, well, that's kind of what I do. That's like what I'm really good at. Like self-creating, being like a second or third scoring option. All that to say, Gordon's commentary rubbed people the wrong way, and it probably should have. Gordon's play in Oklahoma City was awful, and you can't really look back and say it was a success, other than the expiring money. But I also don't think he deserved as much backlash as he got today, because I truly believe when he says like what could have been or should have been was what he thought was actually going to happen, and maybe what he was told was the vision.
I'll be short on this only because I know we're going long, especially on Hayward. I also push back into your second point. I think the Thunder wanted him to create more, and I just don't think he was able to do so. Wasn't able to find that confidence, wasn't able to find that within the role and the flow of the offense, was a little too timid. I think the Thunder would have loved to see him create more.
I don't know if he could have, whatever Gordon thinks his role was going to be or whatever he thought it should be, if his plan, if he was like protesting, pouting a little bit by not shooting at all, you damaged your stock more than you ever could have by doing that, right?
I think it's a thing.
His stock damaging, you just think he's going to be like...
No, I don't think he would intentionally I'm not going to shoot in protest.
Yeah, I would also.
Correct.
And if that's not the case, which the more realistic, the reality is he probably did not do that. He probably just was stuck between not wanting to do too much and whatever.
Yeah.
It's just shoot at all.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Be a threat.
Be any kind of even if you don't love the role you're in. At least Melo shot the ball. Shot like
the only threat he was making me a threat to myself.
Yes, I made Kyle Singler comps early on, and I was right. I was right.
Yeah.
I've got one to transition us to the next one. You guys
He's a
ready?
rat bastard.
He's a rat bastard.
So tell him, Silva. We need to make that a sounder. And this one can go really quick because obviously it's not a prominent player on this team. But I tweeted this out this afternoon when I was listening to these during, I think News 9 had a stream. In a world of Gordon Hayward's, be a Bismack Biyombo. Biyombo thought the best quote from his availability was, as a player, you play so long in the league that you lose sight of things. These guys reminded me to enjoy life a little bit while playing basketball. He talked about Shai being a little brother and how he's going to be an MVP in the league and should have been this year. He talked about, I study players and to understand players, kind of similar to Kenrich Williams. We'll get into that as well. And just talked about how special he thinks Chet is and how impressive it is that he was able to put the work in for 82 games. That's the veteran, the washed up veteran that you need to be, not a Gordon Hayward. So that's my thoughts on Bismack before we move on.
I love it. Yeah, we can move on from Bismack though. Love Bismack.
Can I make one comment on
Go
Bismack?
ahead. Go ahead.
On the previous comment of roster turnover and everybody looks different in 2 to 5 years. Oh, tornado sirens going off.
Tornado.
Sorry about that.
I'm keeping.
There is.
Another one.
There are 4 to 5 players on this roster that could not show up to.
I'm gonna mute myself.
There's tornado.
Mine's going
sirens.
off too. It's just not as loud.
That could or should not show up to media day next year, and I don't think most fans would notice. Like the fans that tuned into the playoffs probably don't know who Bismack or Muskie or Lindy. Like there's a lot of those are great guys and great players in their roles in the locker room and on the court, all that kind of stuff. But like roster turnover, it's not like in years past where it's like, oh my gosh, they got to cut this guy to make room for this guy. This is a weird scenario where like there's 4 or 5 vets they traded for and made room for that like had zero impact in the playoffs. And I think it's totally fine if they're gone.
I'm laughing at Silva in our private chat. No, I think you're exactly right.
Don't
No,
laugh.
I am not laughing at tornadoes. I'm just laughing at his reaction. I'll be right back. Hey, there's no other way I'd rather go out than podcasting with you guys live during a tornado. I think you're spot on there, Nick.
Yeah.
It still was cool to see.
Yes. Let's go to my favorite quote of the day. I listened to the quote, but I'm going to credit Joel Lorenzi from the Oklahoman because I'm reading it off of his Twitter
Don't give
timeline.
Joel
right now.
credit.
Joel just turned what, like 17?
No, Joel's early 20s, living the life, going
He's a
and
good
doing
dude.
the young.
Very good dude.
He's awesome.
I doubt Joel listens to the pod, but Joel, if you listen to the pod,
I'm gonna
what's
text him to come listen and give you
That's
shit
right.
just
We're
for
going to tell
talking
him
about
now.
Here's Joel's tweet. He said, Daignault said he wanted to use last night's pain as an investment. I asked Shai if he hopes to weaponize or / harbor that feeling. Shai's response, 100%. The moment I stepped off the court, it felt like, well, we're here. We lost. We lost for a reason. And all you can do is learn and get better from that. Here's the quote. Like that's part of the quote, but here's the part that's important. That's how you ultimately get to where you want to go and where we want to go. It would be great to win a championship this year. It would be great to achieve all of our goals. But more often than not, you don't get them when you want them. You get them when you deserve them.
Bar.
I like how Silva unmutes to talk and you just hear the wail of the tornado siren in the background. It's like an apocalyptic podcast. Absolute bar. This man has spent a lot of time around Sam Presti, is what that quote tells me. The level of maturity from that quote from a 25-year-old superstar who was second in MVP voting is just absolutely absurd to me. When I was 25, I wasn't saying anything like this. I was a jackass. Still am. I came on the podcast with a pack of cigs and a beer a week ago, right? Like emotional maturity, Shai is like lapped me. What a quote, though, and what a perspective to have. You don't get it when you want it. You get it when you deserve it. That's
like a Pressy prototype in the lab.
Exactly. That's taking the onus and putting it on yourself and on your team. We didn't deserve this yet, and we have more work to put in, and we have to get back and get better. What a quote. That is the type of guy you want leading your team.
And these players are so bought in. It starts with the superstar and leader of the team. That is why, back to some of the things we already have discussed, that Pressy didn't go in and make a win now trade. You have these guys bought in. I had that one as well. Jacob, and also from Shai, he said he's never been so close to a basketball team in his life. Maybe AAU, but he kind of says like maybe not even that. That's so cool. These guys are super close, and I'm sure that will tie in with some of these other players we touch on as well.
Agreed. JD, who do you want to go to next?
Um,
Are there any big things you want to talk about? It
Giddey,
could be a
probably.
specific player. Okay, we want to go Giddey.
Yeah, it's probably time to go to Josh Giddey.
You want to read us some quotes before we start, or you want to sprinkle them in as you talk?
I'll just read through. I pulled some stuff from Clemente, just pulling quotes from the press conference. I'll just kind of quickly go through.
We're shouting out Clemente and
Ryland's
Joel.
gonna be so upset with us.
Neither
I
of
was
these
tweeting at him.
Neither of these bastards have even come on the pod before.
I know. So some of these, Josh Giddey on struggles this season. This is a quote. This is probably the biggest challenge I've ever gone through for a number of reasons. Obviously, there's so much more to a person than basketball. Clemente said he was on the verge of tears in this press conference. He said he's going to work on shooting in the offseason. He said he's got to look in the mirror and be like, I got to be better. I got to do what I do, and I will be. Never wants to be in a situation like that again, like he was against the Mavs, where he just couldn't really be played and be effective. And then this is kind of the big one. When asked about the extension this summer, he said, I love it here. This is home away from home. I love everything about this place. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be with the guys.
So this was the first one I was actually able to listen to live, because it's when I realized that News 9 was actually streaming them. And I mean, I think Joel did a good job touching on the emotion of Josh. It did seem like he was on the verge of tears, but one thing that really didn't come through the context of some of the tweets from all the reporters tweeting it out, he touched so much on not only his family, but the team and the organization and their support with all of his off-court things going on and his struggles on the court. I talked about obviously how tough it was for him this season, but their support and the brotherhood. And he said, obviously it helped just going and working out, playing basketball. That's like a release in itself, but being around those guys, being around the organization, like how close we are, that got me through it. I just thought that was so powerful. A really honest Josh, and what a stark contrast to the player we just got done talking about, and like a veteran in Gordon Hayward. Just really impressed by Josh's maturity and his openness.
I thought Josh was very vulnerable and very self-aware. Reading the quotes is one thing. Listening to it, Taylor, like you mentioned, is another. And I kind of got two vibes from Josh. And this is just some dude, some asshole on Twitter, or sorry, on YouTube watching the thing, right? Like, I don't know anything. I got two vibes. Vibe number one is that Josh is very emotionally connected to this team, right? And they helped him through some really rough times, his most difficult stretch professionally. And I think Josh would say his most difficult moments in life, facing like adversity, facing like backlash with the off the court issues, right? And what came with that. I think he found a home. I think he found people that genuinely care about him and his well-being, not as a basketball player, but as a man. And I mean, he had the line of like, there being days where he didn't even want to get out of bed and didn't want to do anything. And like, I can very, very much relate to that. Right. So I can understand that shared connectedness of the team as family and yada, yada, yada. Another vibe I got was that he understands that his fit isn't right for this team. He mentioned things like, number one thing I got to work on is shooting. I don't want to ever be benched again. When I play
Not
for
in a
Team
bad way. He also said he agreed. Sorry, not to interject, but he also said he agreed with Mark's decision to bench him.
For sure. He agreed with the
in the
decision. And
playoffs.
then he said, I don't ever want that to happen to me again.
Which is super fair.
Talking about Team Australia saying, I'm going to have the ball in my hands all the time, and I'm going to be the playmaker, and I'm going to be setting other guys up. That's the type of player I am. That's my game. When it's very clear that that is not what this team needs. So it's this weird kind of intersection where emotionally, I feel like Josh is very attached to OKC, whereas a basketball fit, I think Josh sees that it's not the best scenario for him, just because of the roster construction and the strengths and the weaknesses of the team. They need him to be a more athletic 6'9" guy who can defend and shoot. And those are the two things that he is deficient in. And the one thing that he is very proficient in is something that the team doesn't really need. And so his skill set doesn't really complement the team. I think there's a little bit of a gap there between the emotional connection and the basketball connection.
I think that's spot on. I think he's very torn. And one thing I said too, I think it was Silva and Jacob in our group text. We were just talking about the podcast and I just added in. I think Josh is very torn, but I wouldn't be surprised if his agent, his representation is telling him maybe it would be a good thing if there is a trade opportunity that's better suited for you, while the Thunder organization is saying the same thing. Like, we love you. We want to keep you here. We're invested in you. We want the best for you. That's why we kept riding with you through the playoffs. But at the same time, if the right opportunity comes across for both sides, it could be a good thing for both of us.
Yeah, I don't want to comment on his basketball future because I don't know.
And we got all summer to talk about basketball future.
I don't know if he's in Oklahoma City very long. But personally, I know social media has drug him through the mud, right? And there's a lot to unpack in that situation. I'll say this. Being around him, one of the most mature young adults ever that I've been around in sports. I've talked to a lot of his coaches in Australia. I've talked to a lot of his trainers at the Center of Excellence in Australia. And every single person wants to talk more about how great of a human he is over how great of a basketball player he is. So it sucks that the personal side has been so rough for him, and hearing that stuff almost makes me sick to my stomach to hear. And it didn't surprise me, knowing what he's gone through. Whether it's in Oklahoma City or elsewhere, and we've talked a lot, good and bad, about him. I just hope that he gets in a good headspace and plays good basketball somewhere. Because before the social media drama, which we still don't know a whole lot about, was one of the best human beings ever, right? And it just tarnished a reputation that I don't know will be untarnished ever. And I feel for him, but he's an awesome kid and a good basketball player who has flaws that were exposed in the playoffs. We've all been harsh on him, but he didn't deserve half of what he's gotten. So
for sure. And for what it's worth, every basketball player has flaws.
Yeah.
And I don't want to crucify Josh for his flaws as a basketball player. I just think as far as a fit on this team, his flaws are exactly what they need from him, and his strengths are exactly what they do not need from him.
Hey, fellas, I'm going to have to hop off. The sirens are going off again, and it's
Oh boy.
in
Be
my
careful.
general area.
Be careful. I'm keeping an eye on
Goodbye.
it too. Crazy. End of the season, and we have live tornadoes going on in the background. Gosh, I was just going to mention in the chat, there's people talking about a fake Chris Haynes report. I want to be very clear. Chris Haynes did not report that. That tweet was deleted. There is not, maybe there is mutual interest between the Jazz and Giddey, but that was not actually reported. That is not an actual report.
yeah.
Anyone else you guys want to touch on as far as exit interviews are concerned?
Kaysen, just quickly, he mentioned his rookie duties, which was kind of funny, but he obviously did it with a smile on his face and kind of laughing. But the big thing was that he said he wants to work on playing on ball more. which is something we've talked a lot about this season.
I think that's the big next step for him.
I'm really excited for when we are all in summer league and get to watch that, because I think we'll see him with the ball in his hands in Vegas quite a bit, as well as the Utah
doesn't think
Summer
he's
League.
playing in Vegas.
That could be fair.
Why would he?
Just plays Utah.
To work on that on-ball stuff, Nick.
Oh.
We saw Dub for a little bit, like
Yeah,
one
and
game in
I,
Vegas.
I think the Thunder would say we probably shouldn't have put Deb out there after seeing what he did.
Fair.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Not a whole lot of other ones. I mean,
yeah.
Chet said everything right. He's
Chet-
going to work hard.
He mentioned like the physicality and the mental and physical fatigue. He mentioned like the second I had back.
He looked
not being
tired.
able to recover. That's exactly what I had in my.
He
notes,
looked
Jacob.
tired.
Especially those 3-point shots. His legs just were shot. Oh, also, it was pretty funny that somebody asked Aaron Wiggins about Dig not calling him, saying that he does a little bit. He just does everything on the basketball floor. He said Jay Will gave him shit about that, like the rest of the season. He said, Aaron Wiggins, he does everything, Mr. Everything, and that's just like the camaraderie of this team. It's pretty funny. I think that's it.
Definitely. Nice. One more break, and then on the other side, we will update our predictions standings, and then we'll get out of here. We will be right back. All right, we are back. Gentlemen, since we've been recording this podcast, the second round of the playoffs have concluded. We are now into the conference finals, and the homie Thunder has updated our standings page. Here we go. So, in the second round, as far as OKC Dallas was concerned, JD and I took OKC in 6. Taylor took OKC in 7. Nick took Dallas in 7. Justin took Dallas in 6.
Boo.
So Justin got even more points. He got +3. Nick got +1. The rest of us got 0. We all took Denver in 6 or 7. Minnesota won that game tonight, so we all got 0 points for that. When you look at the other side of the bracket, Boston versus Cleveland. Nick had Boston in 4. JD and I had Boston in 5. Justin and Taylor had Boston in 6. Boston won that series in 5. And then we all took the Knicks in 5. Justin and Taylor took them in 5. JD and I took them in 6. Nick took them in 7.
7?
Yeah, she has on
Oh.
here that she took Knicks in 7.
Okay.
So you almost scored, Nick.
That was
impressive.
Closer to, I thought I took sweep. I remember being peer pressure in that pod, and it was between sweep and 7. I thought I took sweep.
So the standings now, Justin's just kind of blowing us out. 20 points for Justin.
God damn.
14 for me, 12 for Taylor, 11 for JD, 10 for Nick. But we're going to
I'm in
keep
last?
playing for fun. Do what?
I'm in last?
Yes, unfortunately, Nick. I'm sorry.
Just like the Thunder, I'm too inexperienced for the playoffs.
Just 3 of us on here, but let's make some predictions for the conference finals. Out east, we have Boston versus Indiana. Which one do you guys want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
You go first. You haven't got to go
Send it.
first.
I'll go first. I'm taking Boston in 6. I think Boston is always due for one crap the bed game in a series. And I think Indiana is just going to go get one. So I'm going to take Boston in 6.
That means they get 2, though, not
Correct,
just 1.
because they Boston will crap the bed for 1, and Indiana's just good enough to
We'll
go get one.
outscore 'em. That's fair. I'm toward between 6 and 5, but since you went with 6, I don't know. The Pacers got some momentum there against the Knicks. At the same time, there's a lot there that I think they're still kind of like the Thunder, inexperienced. They also don't play a very good defensive style of basketball, and I think the Celtics, even without Porzingis, can win this one in 5. So give me Celtics in 5.
Nick, what do you got out east?
I'm thinking. I'm gonna go Celtics in 5. Indiana's a team that just like, if they have the best first half in Game 7 history, yeah, they're probably going to beat the crap out of you because they score a lot of points. I just don't think a lot of what they do is sustainable. Boston's better. KP or not, Boston at 5.
We've all gone against the Pacers like every series, and they just keep winning. So shout out to the Pacers.
The Knicks also were missing 4 starters.
That is fair. That is very fair.
We forget, like, Julius Randle did not play in the playoffs at all. OG Anunoby played one healthy game in this series. Like, the Knicks might actually be a force next year.
Brunson was banged up throughout the majority of the series.
Broke his hand. Yeah, like that's the same as if like Shai, Chet, and Dub didn't play in this series. Like, what do you think's going to happen?
Yep. Out west, Minnesota versus the Dallas Mavericks. Reverse order. Nick, you got to go first on this one. That's a tough one.
It is.
My genuine thoughts are that Derrick Jones Jr. is not hitting falling backwards over 7-footer jumpers in the clutch, and PJ Washington is not playing like a borderline all-star. And we're going to see a lot of tweets from Thunder fans that say, where was this Mavericks team last series? Minnesota is unreal good. They have depth. Their defense is great. I think the Timberwolves win in 6.
My brain was telling me Wolves in 6. My heart is telling me Wolves in 5 for the reasons you laid out there, Nick. And seeing what they were able to do when Ant only has 16 points, the majority of those coming in the second half, and they come back and defeat the reigning champions on their home court in Game 7. If the Wolves are able to sustain that style of play, I could see this one being over in 5. And I don't mean that as a knock, trying to be a sore loser because the Mavericks beat the Thunder. I'd be saying the same exact thing if the Thunder advanced as well. So give me Wolves in 5.
I'm basically in the same boat, Taylor, as I want to say Wolves in 5. I feel like I'm supposed to say Wolves in 6. I just think the Wolves are the better team. Dallas's 2 big benefits in this series were against the Thunder were 3-point shooting and rebounding, often like opportune offensive rebounds. Don't think that's happening in the Western Conference Finals. Give me Wolves in 5.
And to your question earlier, does that make you feel better or worse about the Thunder?
I'm kind of with what Taylor said. I really don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be cool to say, oh, the Thunder lost to the team that eventually went on and won the title. Like, it makes sense. They were so young. Part of me just dislikes Luka so much that I just want to see him lose.
My stance on that is in 2024. In 2022, could you even name who was playing each other in the conference semis?
Exactly. No.
Like we get so bottled up in this moment of like rivalries brewing and these teams hate each other and oh my gosh, everybody's circling this. In a year, no one's gonna remember they even played each other.
Yep.
Fair. Thunder chick is cracking me up. Obviously, she's been awesome and helped us tracking these predictions postseason. She said we got to get JD out of his shelter for his predictions.
Hey, if he doesn't predict, that means I pass him.
Nah, that's fair.
He's a DNP CD.
Just like Gordon Hayward. Full circle.
Gentlemen, any other thoughts before we get out of here tonight?
Do we want to decide on the charity we're going to donate for the losses? I saw that on the doc.
I was on the document, but I didn't talk about the beginning, so we will do that next pod. So be on the lookout. We are going to hit up the degenerates for money.
So I have a good one.
I don't think we should decide. I think we should have a vote or like
a
nomination. But if you are listening to this pod right now or listen regularly, drop us a DM or a comment in the YouTube on local Oklahoma City charities that you adore, follow, donate to, any of the above. Like we're not here for the dough. We're here to have fun, like Jacob said at the top of the pod. So We want to donate to something that means something to the people that make us money, because we're making money to invest in better equipment to talk more Thunder basketball with you. So let us know. I don't think we should decide on this pod or even on the next pod based on who we want. I think it should be very much a listener decision.
Yeah, I think we should. That's a great idea. Let's take nominations and then we'll make a poll or something.
Yeah.
And just for people who aren't aware, what this is for is our entire season predictions. For each game we got wrong, each of us have to donate $1. And then for money balls that we got wrong, we have to donate $2. And so I think total between all 5 of us, we owe $156. And we said at the beginning of the season that however much we had to pay to a charity, we were going to ask the listeners to match. So we're asking you guys to match $156, and we're going to give a total of $312 to a charity. But if you guys keep pouring in money for the charity, we'll just keep funneling money to the charity. We have donated to Positive Tomorrows in the past. So if someone nominates that,
you said 156.
156 is how much total we owe.
I will match 156. If anybody else listening wants to match 156, or people want to group up and match it, like let's blow this thing up.
I agree. We at least need 156 from the degenerates. Once we decide on what organization it will be for, we will drop the uncontested Venmo. I hope you guys can trust us. I'm not going to go spend them on Pall Malls and a Coors Light. I promise. We will be very transparent and get the money donated. Just a really cool thing for the degenerates to do after an awesome season. So we'll probably get that link. Let's have a decision made, and let's get the Venmo link up this time next week.
Agreed. Sunday.
Next Sunday. Be on the lookout for that. Awesome. Hey, thank you guys so much for tuning in for memorandum pod, for a memorial pod, a eulogy podcast. We had a ton of people in the live stream. So thank you guys so much for that. Again, like Nick said, if you have any nominations for local charities or nonprofits that we should donate to in the OKC metro area, please drop them in the Twitter, DMs, Instagram, YouTube, whatever. That way we can compile all of those and decide who we're going to donate to. Season might be over, folks. There's a lot of content coming up. We've got Sam Presti's exit interview coming up, which is going to be very enlightening. We have draft coverage. We have the draft. We have free agency. We have trades. We have summer league. So much stuff coming up. So make sure to keep it here with the Uncontested. We will keep you guys covered. And thank you so much for an awesome season. Again, just reiterating the beginning of the pod, how much we appreciate you guys. We will be back as normal on Wednesday night. Pods now go to Wednesdays and Sundays with no post games. But we will be here Wednesdays and Sundays. So join us this coming Wednesday as we will chat some more. Until then, and as always, Thunder up.